Story number 1. The Unwanted Gift. It was the eve of Christmas, a night I had always cherished for its warmth and the promise of togetherness. Our family, my wife, Laura, our 10-year-old daughter, Mia, and me had settled into our routine of decorating the tree, baking cookies, and exchanging gifts. This year, however, felt a little different. There was an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite place. Something that seemed to linger in the corners of our otherwise cheerful home. The day before Christmas, a package arrived at our doorstep. It was an unmarked box, wrapped in plain brown paper with a simple ribbon tied around it. There was no note, no sender information, just our family name neatly printed on the front. Laura found it first while unpacking groceries and called me over to inspect it. "Look what came for us," she said, her brow furrowed with curiosity. "I don't recognize the packaging." I took the box, feeling a strange mixture of intrigue and apprehension. "Let's see what it is." We brought the package inside and set it on the kitchen table. Carefully, Laura untied the ribbon and peeled back the brown paper, revealing a small, velvet-lined bag. Inside lay an old-fashioned comb, its once shiny surface now dulled with age. The comb was intricately carved with delicate patterns, the wood worn smooth from years of use. "It's beautiful," Laura remarked, holding it up to the light. "But who would send us something like this?" I shrugged, trying to shake off the unease. "Maybe it's from someone we know, or a long-lost friend." Mia, who had been watching us with wide eyes, piped up, "Can I keep it, Daddy?" I glanced at Laura, who nodded hesitantly. "Sure, sweetheart, if you like it." That night, as we gathered around the fireplace, Mia proudly showed off her new comb. She ran it through her hair, giggling as the soft bristles glided smoothly. But as the evening wore on, subtle disturbances began to surface. It started with small things, objects slightly out of place, a spoon that seemed to have moved on its own, and the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the house when no one else was awake. First, we dismissed these occurrences as the chaos of the holiday season. But as the nights grew colder and the shadows longer, the strange events intensified. Laura and I found ourselves waking up in the middle of the night, feeling an inexplicable presence in the room. Mia started having nightmares, waking up screaming about a shadowy figure watching her from her closet. One particularly cold night, I was jolted awake by the sound of glass shattering downstairs. Heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and crept out of my bedroom, only to find the kitchen in disarray. The mirror above the stove was shattered, shards scattered across the floor. Laura was standing there, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear it too?" she whispered, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. "Yeah, something's not right." The next morning, we decided to confront the mystery head-on. We carefully examined the broken mirror and the remnants of the comb that lay beside it. As I picked up the old comb, I noticed a faint, smudged fingerprint on the handle, one that didn't match either of ours. My blood ran cold as I realized the comb had been handled by someone else, someone who wasn't part of our family. Determined to uncover the truth, we began researching the origins of the comb. Laura reached out to a local antique shop, hoping to find some clues. The owner, a kindly old man named Mr. Thompson, examined the comb with interest. "This is quite a unique piece," he mused, running his fingers over the intricate carvings. "It looks like it's from the early 1900s. I haven't seen anything like this in years." He continued, "There was a woman named Eleanor Whitaker who owned a house not too far from here. She was an avid collector of antique items, including combs like this one, but she disappeared under mysterious circumstances about 50 years ago. Some say her spirit still lingers in the house, unable to move on." Laura and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Do you think this comb is connected to her disappearance?" I asked. Mr. Thompson shrugged. "Hard to say. Many believe that objects can carry the energy of their past owners. If Eleanor's spirit was indeed tied to the comb, It might explain the strange occurrences you're experiencing. Armed with this new information, we decided to visit Eleanor Whitaker's old house. Now abandoned and overgrown with ivy, the house stood at the end of Maple Street, its windows boarded up and the once vibrant garden now a tangled mess of weeds and broken flowers. As we approached, a chill wind blew through the trees, rustling the leaves and sending an eerie silence over the property. Entering the house was like stepping back in time. The interior was dusty and decayed, with furniture covered in white sheets and cobwebs hanging from every corner. We made our way to the attic, where Eleanor had reportedly spent most of her time collecting antiques. There, amidst the clutter, we found an old trunk filled with personal items and photographs. Among them was a portrait of Eleanor, her eyes hauntingly sad, and a handwritten journal. Flipping through the journal, we discovered entries detailing Eleanor's growing obsession with antique objects and her belief that they held the key to preserving memories and loved ones. The last entry was particularly chilling. I fear that without these artifacts, our memories will fade, and with them, our souls. This comb is more than just a tool. It is a vessel for Eleanor's spirit, allowing her to watch over us even in her absence. A shiver ran down my spine as we realized the gravity of the situation. The comb we had received was indeed connected to Eleanor, a woman whose disappearance had left unanswered questions and a lingering sense of sorrow. Determined to free our family from the curse that Eleanor had unwittingly bestowed upon us, we sought the help of a local spiritual healer, Mrs. Evelyn Hart, known for her ability to communicate with restless spirits. She agreed to visit our home and perform a cleansing ritual to dispel the dark energy surrounding us. On the night of the ritual, the house was thick with tension. Laura, Mia, and I gathered in the living room, the old comb placed at the center of a circle inscribed with protective symbols. Mrs. Hart began the ceremony, her voice calm yet commanding as she chanted ancient prayers meant to soothe Eleanor's tormented spirit. As the ritual progressed, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and the shadows seemed to writhe in response to the incantations. The comb began to glow with an otherworldly light, and the air filled with the sound of distant whispers and mournful cries. I felt a presence in the room, a sorrowful energy that resonated with Eleanor's unresolved grief. "Eleanor," Mrs. Hart called out, her voice steady despite the growing unease. "We are here to help you find peace. Release yourself from this vessel and let go of the pain that binds you to this world." The comb pulsed with light, and the room seemed to darken as Eleanor's spirit manifested before us. A ghostly figure, her eyes filled with longing and sorrow. "I can't move on," she whispered, her voice echoing through the room. "I need to preserve my memories, my legacy. Please, help me find peace." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she reached out to Eleanor's spirit. "We understand your desire to remember, but you need to let go. Your memories are safe with us, but you must move on." The tension in the room was palpable as Eleanor's spirit struggled against the binding energy of the comb. Mrs. Hart intensified her chants, her voice rising above the turmoil. "Let go of the past. Eleanor, embrace the peace that awaits you." A surge of energy pulsed through the room, and the comb shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard glowing with a soft, silvery light before dissipating into the air. The oppressive atmosphere lifted instantly, replaced by a profound sense of calm and tranquility. Eleanor's spirit faded, her presence now a distant memory, freed from the curse that had bound her to the comb. As the ritual concluded, Mrs. Hart smiled warmly at us. "Eleanor is at peace now. The curse has been lifted, and your home is free from her lingering sorrow." Relief washed over me as I glanced around the room. The shadows no longer danced menacingly, and the air felt lighter, filled with the promise of new beginnings. We had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger, our bond as a family fortified by the ordeal we had endured. In the days that followed, life returned to normal. The strange occurrences ceased, and the sense of unease that had plagued our home was gone. Mia continued to play with her new comb, now just an ordinary antique without any sinister influence. Laura and I took solace in the knowledge that we had freed our family from the haunting legacy of Eleanor Whitaker. That Christmas became a turning point for us, a reminder of the importance of facing the unknown and seeking closure for those who couldn't find it on their own. We learned that not all gifts are what they seem, and sometimes, the most beautiful presents carry the weight of untold stories and lingering spirits. As the years passed, the memory of that harrowing Christmas lingered, but it was overshadowed by the warmth of new traditions and the joy of a family united. The lessons we learned about love, resilience, and the power of confronting the past remained etched in our hearts, guiding us through the darkest of times. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside and the shadows stretch long across the walls, I catch a fleeting glimpse of a figure in the corner of my eye, a gentle reminder that some spirits, though freed, never truly disappear. It's a comforting thought, knowing that Eleanor's sorrow has been lifted. Yet it also serves as a reminder of the fragile boundary between our world and the beyond. 1 year after that fateful Christmas, as we gathered once again around the fireplace, I found myself reflecting on the events that had transpired. Mia was now 12, her imagination still vivid but tempered by the experiences we had shared. Laura and I had grown closer, our bond strengthened by the trials we had overcome. The old house, once a site of haunting memories, now felt like a sanctuary filled with love and laughter. During our annual Christmas cleanup, I stumbled upon a small, forgotten box tucked away in the attic. Curious, I opened it to find a collection of Eleanor's unfinished projects, beautifully knitted scarves and hats, each one a testament to her skill and dedication. Alongside them was a letter, addressed to whoever might find it in the future. To the family who wears my creations, know that each stitch holds a piece of my heart. If you ever feel the shadows closing in, remember that you are not alone. Let love and unity guide you through the darkness, just as it has guided you to this point. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read Eleanor's heartfelt words. It was as if she had found the peace she sought, leaving behind a legacy of love and resilience. We decided to honor her memory by continuing her tradition of knitting, creating warm garments for those in need and spreading the love she had once poured into each stitch. That night, as we sat by the fire, I placed one of Eleanor's scarves around my shoulders, feeling the warmth and comfort it provided. The house was silent, the shadows benign and welcoming. Mia joined us, her laughter echoing through the room, a beacon of light that dispelled any lingering darkness. As I looked around at my family, I realized that the true magic of Christmas lay not in the gifts themselves, but in the bonds we shared and the love that held us together. The haunted legacy of Eleanor Whitaker had transformed into a story of redemption and healing, a testament to the power of confronting the past and embracing the future with open hearts. That Christmas became a symbol of our journey, a reminder that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, love and courage can triumph over the darkest of curses. We had learned to respect the stories behind the gifts we receive, understanding that some presents carry more than just sentimental value. They hold the essence of lives once lived and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Years later, as I watch my children grow and create their own traditions, I often think back to that first eerie Christmas. It taught me to cherish every moment, to honor the past while embracing the future, and to never underestimate the power of love in overcoming the shadows that seek to intrude upon our lives. Cherish your loved ones, honor the stories behind the gifts you receive, and remember that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for healing and peace. Story number 2. Whispers in the Glass. The snow fell softly that December evening, blanketing the town in a serene white silence that only the holidays could bring. I had always found comfort in the predictable rhythms of winter, the way the world seemed to pause, wrapped in a hushed stillness. But this year, something felt different, an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite place. It started innocently enough. My closest friend, Emily, had moved across the country years ago, and we'd kept our friendship alive through sporadic calls and the occasional visit. This Christmas, however, she sent me a package out of the blue. When it arrived, it was wrapped in the most exquisite paper adorned with intricate snowflake patterns and tied with a deep red ribbon. There was no card, no note, just my name elegantly scripted on the front. Curiosity piqued. I brought the package into the cozy living room, the scent of pine from the Christmas tree mingling with the anticipation of the unknown. I carefully untied the ribbon and peeled back the layers of wrapping paper, revealing a beautifully crafted box. It was sturdy, made of rich mahogany wood with delicate carvings of holly leaves and berries etched into its surface. My fingers traced the patterns, marveling at the craftsmanship. Inside the box lay a small, ornate mirror. The frame was silver, intricately designed with swirling vines and tiny gemstones that caught the light, making the mirror shimmer like a piece of art. It was stunning, far more elaborate than any mirror I owned. Emily had always had a knack for finding unique treasures, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this gift was different. "Happy Christmas, Mark," I whispered to myself, holding the mirror up to the light. The glass was flawless, reflecting my image with uncanny clarity. I admired its beauty before deciding to place it on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, where it could catch the warm glow of the holiday lights. That night, as I settled into bed, the mirror seemed to draw my attention. The images within its frame were crisp, yet something felt off. I shook off the unease and closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but sleep was elusive, and the night stretched long with restless tossing and turning. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Emily, her voice tinged with excitement. "Merry Christmas, Mark. I hope you liked the gift." "I did, Emily. It's beautiful," I replied, forcing a smile. "But I did notice a fingerprint on the clip. Do you know anything about that?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, that? I must have dropped it while I was examining the mirror. Don't worry about it. It's probably just a smudge." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. The conversation left me more unsettled than before. Who else could have touched the mirror? I decided to set it aside, hoping the feeling would pass. But as days turned into weeks, the disturbances only grew. It began subtly. Objects would move from their places, seemingly on their own. A book would shift on the shelf. The picture frame would tilt slightly, or a candle would flicker despite the absence of a breeze. At first, I dismissed these incidents as forgetfulness or the chaos of holiday preparations. But then the nightmares started. Every night, I dreamt of walking through a darkened hallway, the walls closing in around me. In each dream, I carried the mirror, its surface reflecting not just my image but twisted, distorted versions of myself. And always, just behind me, stood a shadowy figure, his presence both menacing and sorrowful. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed the mirror was no longer on the mantel. Panic surged through me as I searched the house, finding it now perched on the kitchen counter. My heart raced. How had it moved? I picked it up, feeling an inexplicable chill run through my body. As I held the mirror, I saw my reflection, but it wasn't quite right. My features were distorted, twisted into a grotesque parody of myself, and the shadowy figure loomed just behind me in the glass. Fear clawed at me as I realized the mirror was more than just a beautiful artifact. It was a conduit for something dark and malevolent. The strange occurrences intensified. Doors slammed shut on their own. Eerie whispers echoed through the halls, and the temperature in the house plummeted without warning. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, tormented by unseen forces. Desperate for answers, I decided to investigate the mirror's origins. I reached out to antique experts and delved into old records, hoping to uncover the history behind the mysterious gift. My research led me to a small-town library, where I pored over dusty archives and forgotten newspapers. That's when I stumbled upon a chilling story. The mirror had belonged to a woman named Eleanor Whitaker, who had lived in the town over a century ago. Eleanor was known for her exquisite craftsmanship, creating mirrors that were said to possess almost magical qualities. However, her life was marred by tragedy. Her husband had died under mysterious circumstances, and Eleanor was left to raise their only child alone. The town whispered about strange occurrences in her home, ghostly apparitions, unexplained noises, and a pervasive sense of dread that settled over the household. One particularly harsh winter, Eleanor vanished without a trace, leaving behind her unfinished projects and the beautiful mirrors that had brought her both fame and sorrow. The town never forgot the eerie legacy she left behind, and her story became a cautionary tale about the thin veil between the living and the dead. Realizing the connection between Eleanor and the mirror I possessed, I felt a wave of dread. The mirror wasn't just an object. It was a vessel for Eleanor's restless spirit, a conduit for her unresolved pain and anguish. The shadowy figure in my reflections was Eleanor, trapped within the glass, reaching out for help, determined to free both myself and Eleanor from this haunting. I sought the help of a local medium, Mrs. Evelyn Hart, known for her ability to communicate with spirits. She agreed to visit my home and assist in lifting the curse that bound Eleanor to the mirror. On a cold winter night, Mrs. Hart arrived, her presence calming yet filled with an air of authority. She immediately sensed the dark energy emanating from the mirror and began to explain the situation. Eleanor's spirit is trapped within this mirror, she said softly. Her sorrow and pain have bound her to this world, unable to move on. We need to help her find peace. Together, we devised a plan to perform a cleansing ritual, aiming to release Eleanor's spirit and break the curse. The ritual required candles, salt, sage, and a deep understanding of the spiritual connections that tied Eleanor to the mirror. As we prepared, the atmosphere in the house grew tense, the shadows seeming to writhe in anticipation. As midnight approached, we began the ritual. Mrs. Hart chanted ancient incantations, her voice steady and commanding. I held the mirror, focusing my intentions on freeing Eleanor from her torment. The room grew colder, and the candle flames flickered violently as if resisting our efforts. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the house, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. The mirror's surface began to ripple like water, and Eleanor's figure materialized, her sorrowful eyes meeting mine with a mixture of desperation and hope. "Please, help me," she whispered, her voice echoing through the room. I reached out, my hand trembling, trying to connect with her spirit. "I'm here to help you, Eleanor. Let us release you from this place." The mirror glowed with an ethereal light as Eleanor's spirit began to dissolve, the darkness receding as her presence was lifted from the glass. The oppressive energy that had haunted my home dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of peace and tranquility. As the final remnants of Eleanor's spirit faded, the mirror returned to its original state, reflecting only my own image once more. The strange occurrences ceased, and the house felt lighter, the shadows no longer menacing but simply part of the natural evening light. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The nightmares faded, and the eerie disturbances were gone. I kept the mirror, now a beautiful reminder of the journey I had undertaken and the peace we had achieved together. The experience taught me the importance of facing the unknown and seeking closure, not just for myself but for those who couldn't find it on their own. Every Christmas since, I placed the mirror on the mantle, a symbol of resilience and the enduring bonds of friendship. The memory of Eleanor's struggle and eventual release remains a poignant reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is hope for healing and peace. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside and the shadows stretch long across the walls, I catch a fleeting glimpse of something behind me in the mirror, a soft, almost imperceptible smile from Eleanor, a silent thank you that assures me the bond we formed transcends the boundaries of life and death. Cherish your loved ones, respect the stories behind the gifts you receive, and remember that some mysteries are best faced with courage and compassion. Because in the end, It's our willingness to help those who can't help themselves that defines the true spirit of the holidays. Story number 3. The Pen of Shadows. I never believed in curses or haunted objects. To me, they were nothing more than the fodder for horror stories and campfire tales. But that belief shattered on a cold December evening, the night that changed my life forever. It was Christmas Eve, and the office was buzzing with the usual holiday cheer. Secret Santa exchanges, festive decorations, and the aroma of spiced coffee filled the air. I was looking forward to a quiet evening at home with my wife, Laura, and our young son, Tommy. As I packed up my things, my colleague, Greg, handed me a small, elegantly wrapped box. "Merry Christmas, Mark," he said with a smile. "Thought you might like this." I thanked him, accepting the gift without much thought. Greg and I had worked together for years, but we weren't particularly close. Still, it was the season of giving, and I appreciated the gesture. At home, Laura and I sat by the fireplace, the glow of the flames casting dancing shadows across the room. Tommy was already asleep, dreaming of Santa and presents. I placed Greg's gift on the mantel, admiring its sleek design. The box was made of deep blue paper, adorned with a silver ribbon and a delicate snowflake sticker. "Open it," Laura encouraged. Sensing my curiosity, I carefully untied the ribbon and peeled back the paper. Inside was a beautiful ballpoint pen, crafted from polished ebony wood with intricate silver engravings along its length. It was exquisite, a stark contrast to the mundane office supplies I was used to. There was no card, no note, just the pen, lying in a soft, velvet-lined box. "Wow, it's really nice," I remarked, holding the pen up to the light. The craftsmanship was impeccable, each detail meticulously carved. I slipped it into my pocket, thinking it would make a fine addition to my collection. That night, after tucking Tommy into bed, I sat down to write a few notes before calling it a day. I pulled out Greg's pen, admiring its weight and balance. As I began to write, I noticed something strange, a faint smudge on the clip. Leaning closer, I realized it was a fingerprint. My heart skipped a beat. "Is that my fingerprint?" I wondered aloud, my mind racing. I'd never seen that particular mark before. It wasn't mine, and I couldn't think of anyone at work with that distinctive print. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of unease. The smudge from the night before still lingered on the pen. I decided to examine it more closely, using a magnifying glass. The fingerprint was small but distinct, unlike any I had ever seen. Panic began to set in. Could Greg have sent me something with his own print on it? It didn't make sense. As the day progressed, I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. Work was a whirlwind of meetings and deadlines, but my mind kept drifting back to the pen and the mysterious fingerprint. That evening, I received a call from the local police department. "Mr. Anderson, this is Detective Laura Harris. We need to speak with you regarding a murder case." My blood ran cold. "Murder? What are you talking about?" "We have evidence linking you to the recent death of Jonathan Reed. A ballpoint pen was found at the scene, and it matches the one you received from your colleague, Greg Thompson." I felt my stomach drop. "That's impossible. I received the pen on Christmas Eve, and I wasn't even aware of any incident until now." Detective Harris sounded sympathetic but firm. "We need you to come in for questioning. Any information you can provide about the pen and its origins will be helpful." I spent the next few hours in a sterile interrogation room, trying to piece together what was happening. Greg had handed me the pen without any fanfare, but now it was the key piece of evidence in a murder investigation. I couldn't fathom how a simple pen could tie me to such a heinous act. When Laura saw me after the police station, her face was pale with worry. "Mark, what's going on?" I recounted the events, from receiving Greg's gift to the discovery of the fingerprint and the sudden police investigation. Laura listened intently, her eyes searching mine for answers. "We need to find out who that fingerprint belongs to," she said, taking my hand. "There's something not right here." Determined to clear my name, I decided to confront Greg. When I called him, he answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful. "Hey, Mark, did you like the pen?" "Yes, it's impressive," I replied cautiously. "But there's something I need to ask you. Whose fingerprint was on it?" There was a brief pause before Greg responded, his tone shifting. "Oh, that? It must have been a mistake. I didn't realize my print was on it. I was handling it a lot lately, you know, just writing notes and such." His explanation didn't satisfy me. There was something off about his response, an underlying tension I couldn't place. I pressed further, but Greg quickly ended the call, leaving me more confused than before. Back at home, Laura and I decided to dig deeper into the pen's origins. We visited the antique shop where Greg had supposedly found it, but the owner had no record of selling such a high-end item. Frustration mounted as we hit dead ends, but we refused to give up. One night, unable to sleep, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the pen on the coffee table. The room was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the lights flickered. I felt a presence, an invisible force pressing against me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the pen's silver engravings that seemed to glow ominously. A voice echoed in my mind, cold and hollow. "I am Victor. You wear my pen now." I recoiled, fear gripping me. "What do you want?" "Erase the evidence," Victor commanded. "Clean my tracks." Panic surged through me as I realized the pen was more than just a gift. It was a conduit for a malevolent spirit. Victor had been a murderer, and somehow, his essence was tied to the pen, attempting to manipulate me into covering his crimes. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Detective Harris, explaining the supernatural occurrence. She listened skeptically but agreed to assist, not fully understanding the gravity of the situation. Together, we delved into Victor's past, uncovering a history of violent crimes and manipulative behavior. Victor had been a master of psychological manipulation, charming his way into people's lives only to exploit and destroy them. His disappearance 5 years ago had been a mystery, with no clues left behind. As we pieced together the puzzle, the disturbances intensified. Objects moved on their own. The pen seemed to pulse with dark energy, and the presence of Victor became more tangible. Laura began experiencing vivid nightmares, seeing visions of Victor's crimes and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. One evening, as I sat in the interrogation room, the pen began to writhe in my hands, the engravings twisting into sinister shapes. Victor's voice echoed louder, more insistent. "Finish what I started. Help me disappear." I struggled to maintain control, but the grip of the pen was too strong. Memories of Greg's strange behavior resurfaced, his evasiveness, his sudden disappearance after my questioning. I realized Greg was still alive, possibly acting on Victor's influence. Determined to break free, I consulted with Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned psychologist with expertise in trauma and supernatural phenomena. Dr. Hart listened to my story, her expression serious yet compassionate. "This pen is a vessel for Victor's spirit," she explained. "To rid yourself of him, you need to sever the connection. We need to perform a ritual to cleanse the pen and banish his presence." With Dr. Hart's guidance, Laura and I prepared for the ritual. On Christmas Eve, the same day the pen was sent to me, we gathered in the living room, surrounding the pen with candles and protective symbols. Dr. Hart led us through the incantations, her voice steady despite the mounting tension. As the ritual progressed, the room grew colder, the shadows thickening as Victor fought to maintain his hold. The pen glowed with an unholy light, and Victor's voice surged through the room. "You can't break me. I will always be here." Summoning every ounce of willpower, I focused on severing the bond between me and the pen. Laura joined me, her presence a source of strength and determination. Together, we completed the ritual, the final words reverberating through the space. A blinding flash of light enveloped the room, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, a scream echoed through the house, fading into nothingness as the oppressive presence lifted. The pen lay inert on the coffee table, its malevolent energy extinguished. Exhausted but victorious, we knew the ordeal was far from over. Victor's attempt to manipulate me had been thwarted, but the scars of the experience lingered. Greg remained missing, and the police investigation took a new direction, focusing on his potential involvement in Victor's disappearance. In the aftermath, life began to return to normal, but the memory of that Christmas lingered. The pen was locked away in a safe, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the darkness that can lurk within seemingly innocent objects. Laura and I became more cautious, understanding that not all gifts come without a price. As the years passed, I often found myself reflecting on that fateful Christmas, grateful for the support of Laura and the expertise of Dr. Hart. We learned that confronting the darkness requires courage and resilience, and that love and determination can overcome even the most insidious of evils. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside and the shadows dance just beyond the edge of the room, I catch a fleeting glimpse of something dark and familiar, a reminder that evil never truly dies. It merely waits for the right moment to resurface. Stay vigilant, cherish your loved ones, and never underestimate the hidden forces that may seek to entwine themselves in your life. Because sometimes, the most beautiful gifts carry the darkest secrets, and only by facing them can we hope to find true peace. Story number 4. The Knitted Curse. December had always held a special place in my heart. The crisp air, the scent of pine from freshly cut trees, and the warm glow of holiday lights created an atmosphere of magic and nostalgia. Living alone in my modest home on the outskirts of town, I found solace in these traditions, cherishing the quiet moments of reflection and gratitude. This year, however, something felt different, a subtle shift that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until Christmas Eve that I realized just how profound that change would be. My grandmother, Rose, had passed away 3 years prior, leaving behind a legacy of love, wisdom, and an impressive collection of handmade items. She had always been the master of knitting, creating everything from cozy scarves to intricate blankets. Every Christmas, she would send me a specially knitted gift, each one more beautiful than the last. This year, I hadn't expected anything, assuming that perhaps the distance between us would make it difficult. But as the evening settled in, a package arrived at my doorstep, wrapped in her familiar floral patterned paper and tied with a delicate ribbon. Curiosity piqued. I brought the package inside and placed it on the kitchen table. There was no note, no indication of who might have sent it. Assuming it was from a distant relative or a close family friend, I carefully untied the ribbon and peeled back the paper. Inside lay a stunning knitted coat, the same rich reds and deep greens that Rose favored. The craftsmanship was impeccable, each stitch a testament to her skill and dedication. "This is beautiful," I murmured, admiring the intricate patterns that adorned the fabric. The coat felt surprisingly warm and inviting, a comforting presence that seemed to emanate from its very fibers. Couldn't wait to wear it, imagining how it would keep me cozy during the chilly winter nights. The next morning, the weather had turned colder, the first snowflakes of the season beginning to fall. I decided to wear the coat, appreciating its snug fit and the way it shielded me from the biting wind. As I zipped it up, a sense of nostalgia washed over me, memories of past Christmases spent with Rose flickering in my mind. Little did I know, this coat would soon become the source of an unsettling series of events. That night, as I settled into bed, the house was enveloped in silence. The only sounds were the faint ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional creak of the old wood. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different, an inexplicable tension in the air, pulling the covers tighter around me. I tried to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. Midnight brought with it a sudden chill, colder than the winter air outside. I glanced around my room, the shadows cast by the moonlight stretching long and distorted across the walls. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and for a moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A fleeting shadow, darker than the night itself, standing just behind me, heart pounding. I turned swiftly, but the room was empty, shaking off the fear. I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, perhaps a shadow cast by passing cars. The next morning, I woke up feeling unusually restless. The coat seemed to cling tighter, this fabric colder against my skin than before. As I moved through the house, small things felt slightly out of place. Books that hadn't been on the shelf, a misplaced picture frame. At first, I dismissed them as the result of my own disorganization. But the disturbances grew more frequent and unsettling. One evening, while preparing dinner, I noticed the coat lying on the back of my chair, though I distinctly remember hanging it in the closet. The room felt inexplicably colder as I approached, and the shadows seemed to dance with a life of their own. Unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. I decided to set the coat aside, hoping to shake off the lingering dread. Days passed, and the strange occurrences intensified. Objects moved on their own. Doors creaked open without reason, and an oppressive feeling of being watched settled over me, especially during the late hours of the night. The shadows no longer just moved, they seemed to reach out, almost touching me with their dark tendrils. I began to hear faint whispers, barely audible but filled with sorrow and desperation. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I began researching the coat's history. I visited the local library, poring over old records and newspaper archives. That's when I stumbled upon a series of articles about Rose's former home on Maple Street. The house had been infamous for a string of unsolved murders and eerie occurrences that left the community on edge. Neighbors had reported seeing ghostly figures and hearing anguished cries echoing through the halls. One article detailed Rose's grandmother, Eleanor Whitaker, who had lived in that very house before moving in with Rose. Eleanor had been a talented artisan, much like Rose, known for her intricate knitting. However, her life had been marred by tragedy. Her husband had died under mysterious circumstances, and she had been left to care for their children alone. Desperate and grief-stricken, Eleanor had imbued her creations with a piece of her sorrow, unknowingly binding a curse to the items she crafted. The curse was said to bring misfortune and despair to those who possessed the jewelry, a dark reminder of Eleanor's unending grief. Realizing the connection between the coat and Eleanor's tragic story, I felt a deep sense of responsibility. It was as if the very threads of the garment were woven with Eleanor's pain, binding her restless spirit to my own. Determined to free both myself and whoever or whatever was haunting me, I decided to confront the situation head-on. One snowy Christmas Eve, the house was enveloped in an eerie silence, the kind that made every creak and groan of the old house feel amplified. I sat in my living room, the coat draped over the back of my favorite chair, trying to muster the courage to face the darkness that had taken hold of my home. The temperature dropped sharply, and I could see my breath in the air, a visible reminder of the cold that had settled in. Suddenly, the whispers began, louder and more insistent than before. "Help me," they seemed to plead. I stood up, my heart racing, and approached the coat. The fabric seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the intricate patterns shifting and swirling under my touch. As I reached out to touch it, a surge of energy pulsed through me, and the room seemed to dissolve into darkness. I found myself standing in the old Whitaker house, the air thick with sorrow and malevolence. Shadows twisted and writhed around me, and the sound of anguished cries echoed through the halls. I knew I had to find Eleanor, to understand her pain and help her find peace. As I navigated the decaying rooms, I could feel her presence, a lingering spirit trapped by her own grief and the curse woven into her creations. In the center of the house, I discovered Eleanor's old sewing room, cluttered with unfinished projects and scattered tools. Among them was the same coat that had brought me so much anguish. It lay on a wooden table, threads tangled and worn. I reached out, touching the fabric, and felt a connection, an unspoken understanding of her suffering. "Eleanor," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I'm here to help you." The room grew colder, and a shadowy figure began to materialize before me. Eleanor's ghostly form stood there, her eyes hollow yet filled with sorrow. "I can't move on," she cried, her voice echoing with pain. "This coat binds me to this world. My grief, my loss, it holds me here." I felt a surge of empathy and determination. "Let me help you. Let me break the curse." Eleanor reached out a spectral hand, guiding me to pick up the coat. As I held it, I could feel the weight of her sorrow pressing down on me, the threads of the fabric intertwining with my very soul. "You must release your grief," she pleaded. "Only then can I find peace." I knew what I had to do. With all the strength I could muster, I focused on my own grief and loss, the memories of Rose's passing and the loneliness that had settled in since then. Channeling my emotions into the act, I began to unravel the threads of the coat, each stitch releasing a piece of Eleanor's bound sorrow. As the final thread came loose, a burst of light enveloped the room, and Eleanor's spirit began to dissolve, her form becoming more translucent until she was nothing but a whisper of gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice fading into the ether. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I awoke back in my living room, the coat lying inert on the chair. The temperature had returned to normal, and the shadows no longer danced ominously. I felt lighter, the burden of grief lifted not just for Eleanor but for myself as well. The coat, once a source of fear, now stood as a symbol of healing and closure. In the days that followed, the disturbances ceased entirely. My home felt warmer, the silence no longer oppressive but comforting. I kept the coat, now a cherished reminder of the journey I had undertaken and the strength I had found in confronting the past. Every time I looked at it, I felt a sense of connection to Eleanor, knowing that her spirit had finally found peace. Christmas that year was different. Instead of the subdued atmosphere that had plagued us, there was a renewed sense of joy and hope. The memories of the haunting lingered, but they were overshadowed by the warmth of family and the triumph over darkness. I had learned that some gifts carry more than just sentimental value. They hold the essence of lives once lived, their joys and sorrows woven into the fabric of our existence. As the years passed, the coat remained a beloved part of our holiday traditions, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love and empathy. I became more attuned to the unseen forces that linger just beyond our perception, understanding that every object carries a story, a piece of history that deserves respect and acknowledgement. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside and the shadows stretch long across the walls, I catch a fleeting glimpse of a figure in the corner of my eye, a gentle reminder that the past is never truly gone, and that the bonds we share can transcend even death itself. It's a comforting thought, knowing that Eleanor's spirit watches over us, a silent guardian bound by love and the threads of a well-knitted curse. Cherish your loved ones, honor the stories behind the gifts you receive, and remember that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for healing and peace. Story number 5. The Silent Witness. Christmas had always been a time of joy and togetherness for the Miller family. The twinkling lights, the scent of pine from the freshly cut tree, and the warmth of family gatherings created an atmosphere of unparalleled comfort. This year, however, felt different, less vibrant, more subdued. Perhaps it was the lingering shadow of recent layoffs at my company or the subtle strains in my marriage. Whatever the reason, the holiday spirit seemed just out of reach. It was on the evening of December 20th when the package arrived. My wife, Karen, and I had invited our daughter, Lily, to spend the holidays with us this year. Our close friend, Margaret, who had moved to another state years ago, occasionally sent gifts during the holidays. But this year was the first time in a long while. The package was unmarked, wrapped in festive red paper with a simple white ribbon. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was an exquisite porcelain doll. "Isn't she lovely?" Margaret had written in her handwritten note. Thought Lily might like her. Lily, a bright and imaginative 8-year-old, instantly fell in love with the doll. Its delicate features, meticulously painted blue eyes, and the intricate lace dress made it seem almost lifelike. She named her Ella and placed her on a small shelf in her bedroom, where she could watch over her at night. The first few days passed without incident. Lily played with Ella during the day, arranging her in various poses and inventing elaborate stories about her adventures. However, as the nights grew colder and the days shorter, subtle changes began to manifest. It started with the whispers. First, they were barely audible, faint murmurs that seemed to come from the corners of Lily's room. I assumed it was her imagination, fueled by the stories she created for Ella. But then the whispers became more distinct, carrying an urgent tone that sent chills down my spine. One night, I awoke to the sound of Lily talking in her sleep. Curious and slightly concerned, I crept into her room, only to find her sitting upright in bed, staring intently at Ella. "She's sad," Lily whispered, her eyes vacant. "Ella needs help." I sat beside her, gently stroking her hair. "What do you mean, sweetie? What does Ella need?" Lily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ella can't go back. She's stuck here." Dismissed it as a dream. I left her room and returned to my own. But unease gnawed at me. The next morning, I noticed Ella was no longer on her shelf. Instead, she was sitting on Lily's dresser, staring directly at me with those lifelike blue eyes. I picked her up, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. "Where did you go?" "Ella?" Karen, sensing my discomfort, suggested we move Ella to the living room to keep an eye on her. Reluctantly, I agreed. That night, the disturbances escalated. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls, and shadows danced ominously in the corners of the house. Lily's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would mutter to herself in the dark, and there were moments when she seemed to be sleepwalking, moving silently to the far end of her room and staring blankly at Ella. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Karen and I began researching the doll's origin. We reached out to Margaret, who seemed puzzled by our concerns. "Ella was always a favorite when I was raising my daughter," she said over the phone. "I'm sorry if she's causing any trouble. Maybe Lily just wants to play more." Unconvinced, I delved deeper into the doll's history. Late nights spent scouring the internet and old records unearthed a chilling discovery. Ella was not an ordinary doll. According to a forum dedicated to antique collectibles, the doll had once belonged to a young girl named Emily Turner, who had vanished without a trace on Christmas Eve 5 years ago. The case had gone cold, with no leads or suspects ever identified. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Could Ella be a vessel for Emily's spirit? The idea was terrifying, but the evidence seemed to align too perfectly to ignore. Determined to help both Lily and whoever or whatever Ella was harboring, we decided to confront the situation head-on. One snowy Christmas Eve, the house was enveloped in an eerie silence, the kind that made every creak and groan of the old house feel amplified. Lily was asleep, or so we thought, but I could sense her presence watching from her room. Gathering my courage, I entered her room, only to find her sitting on the floor, holding Ella tightly to her chest. "Lily," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong? How can we help Ella?" Lily looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of fear and determination. "Emily was here," she said softly. "Ella needs to find her." Before I could respond, a cold wind swept through the room, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows coalesced into a darker form behind me, the silhouette of a young girl with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. It was Emily or her ghostly apparition, bound to Ella. "You must help me," the figure whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. "Find me, so I can be free." I felt a surge of empathy and urgency. "We will help you, Emily. Tell us what we need to do." The apparition pointed towards Ella, and I realized that the doll was the key to unlocking the mystery of Emily's disappearance. With Karen and Lily by my side, we embarked on a quest to uncover the truth behind Emily Turner's vanishing. Our investigation led us to the local library, where we pored over old newspaper clippings and police reports. We discovered that Emily had been an active child, involved in school plays and community events. Her disappearance had been a shock to the entire town, sparking countless theories but no concrete answers. One article mentioned a tragic accident that had occurred on the night Emily vanished. A fire had broken out in her family's home, claiming her parents' lives and leaving Emily as the sole survivor. However, there were inconsistencies in the reports. No one could account for how Emily survived the fire or why there was no sign of her after she was supposedly rescued. With this new information, we pieced together that Emily might not have survived the fire. The doll, then, could be more than just a sentimental gift. It might be a lingering spirit, trapped within Ella, seeking closure and freedom. Determined to release Emily's spirit and lift the curse from our family, we sought the help of a local medium, Mrs. Evelyn Hart, known for her ability to communicate with the dead. She agreed to visit our home and perform a cleansing ritual. On the night of the ritual, the house was eerily quiet, the only sound being the howling wind outside. Mrs. Hart guided us through the process, lighting candles and incense to create a protective barrier. She instructed us to hold hands and focus our intentions on freeing Emily's spirit from Ella. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere grew heavy with supernatural energy. Shadows twisted and writhed, and the temperature dropped even further. Lily clutched Ella, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Suddenly, the apparition of Emily materialized before us, her form flickering like a candle flame in the wind. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with both gratitude and sorrow. "I can finally be free." A blinding light enveloped the room, and the oppressive presence lifted instantly. The shadows retreated, and the air felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Lily looked at Ella, who now appeared as just an ordinary doll, devoid of any sinister energy. The next morning, the house felt peaceful once more. The strange occurrences had ceased, and Lily was her usual cheerful self, no longer haunted by the whispers or sleepwalking. The experience had brought our family closer, strengthening our bond as we navigated the terrifying ordeal together. Reflecting on the events, I realized the importance of confronting the unknown and seeking the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. Emily Turner's spirit had been trapped by tragedy and sorrow, but through our determination and love, we were able to help her find peace. Christmas that year was different. Instead of the subdued atmosphere that had plagued us, there was a renewed sense of joy and hope. The memories of the haunting lingered, but they were overshadowed by the warmth of family and the triumph over darkness. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas, and the doll remains a cherished memory rather than a source of fear. Lily has grown, her experiences shaping her into a compassionate and resilient young girl. Karen and I have learned to cherish every moment, understanding that even in the face of the unknown, love and perseverance can light the way through the darkest of nights. May your holidays be filled with love, warmth, and the courage to face the shadows that may cross your path. Story number 6. The Mysterious Gloves. December was always a time of reflection and gratitude for me. Living alone in a modest house on the outskirts of town, I cherished the quiet moments, the crackling of the fireplace, and the simplicity of holiday traditions. This year, however, felt different. The holiday spirit seemed tinged with an undercurrent of unease, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It all began with a package delivered on Christmas Eve. I wasn't expecting anything, and my only regular correspondence was through letters and emails with old friends and family scattered across the country. The package was unmarked, wrapped in plain brown paper with a sturdy twine bow. Curious, I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table. wondering who could have sent it. After dinner, as I sipped my hot cocoa, I decided to open the package. Inside was a pair of sleek, black leather gloves. They were impeccably crafted, the leather soft yet durable, with intricate stitching along the seams. There was no note, no card, just the gloves, resting in the center of the box. Interesting, I mused, lifting them out and examining their quality. They felt warm and inviting, almost calling out to be worn. I tried them on, appreciating the snug fit and the way they seemed to mold to my hands perfectly. The gloves were lightweight, yet they provided an unexpected sense of strength. A nice gift, I thought, despite having no idea who had sent them. That night, as I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house was unusually quiet, the silence almost oppressive. I glanced at my reflection in the hallway mirror, noticing how the gloves made my hands appear larger, more defined. There was a strange satisfaction in the way they enhanced my grip on everyday objects, making mundane tasks feel more purposeful. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. There was an unfamiliar energy coursing through me, a heightened sense of awareness. I went about my day with a newfound confidence, the gloves acting as an extension of my will. But as the day progressed, subtle changes began to manifest. Simple actions felt slightly unnatural, as if my movements were being guided by an invisible force. When I reached for a coffee mug, my hand seemed to anticipate its motion, moving with precision I hadn't consciously planned. By the evening, the sensations intensified. It felt like another presence was sharing my consciousness, making decisions I wasn't fully aware of. I tried to resist, to assert my own will, but the gloves seemed to have a mind of their own. I found myself acting on impulses that didn't align with my usual behavior, making phone calls I had no intention of making, buying items I never thought I needed. Panic set in as I realized something was terribly wrong. The gloves weren't just accessories. They were instruments of control, binding me to a force beyond my understanding. Desperate for answers, I scoured the internet for any information about similar experiences, but nothing concrete surfaced. It was as if the gloves were unique, a one-of-a-kind artifact with a sinister purpose. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to investigate the gloves further. I carefully examined the interior, finding a small, almost imperceptible fingerprint embedded in the leather lining. My heart raced as I realized that the gloves had a history, a previous owner whose identity was now entangled with my own. Determined to uncover the truth, I reached out to the local police department, hoping they could trace the fingerprint and provide some clarity. Detective Laura Harris took my case seriously, intrigued by the mysterious circumstances. After days of investigation, she returned with unsettling news. The fingerprint matched that of a man named Victor Langford, a notorious criminal who had vanished without a trace 5 years ago. Langford was infamous for his manipulative schemes and psychological control over his victims, making him a prime suspect in several unsolved cases. According to the records, Langford had a peculiar obsession with mind control, believing that true power lay in the ability to manipulate others' thoughts and actions. He was involved in a string of high-profile heists and frauds, always staying one step ahead of the authorities. His sudden disappearance left the town rattled, with many speculating foul play or a carefully orchestrated escape. As Detective Harris delved deeper, she uncovered a connection between Langford and a series of unsolved crimes that bore striking similarities to the disturbances I was experiencing. It became clear that the gloves were not just personal items but tools of Langford's twisted legacy, designed to extend his influence beyond his physical presence. Determined to break free from the gloves' control, I sought the help of Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned psychologist specializing in trauma and possession. Her expertise was invaluable as she guided me through techniques to reclaim my autonomy, teaching me to recognize and resist the subtle manipulations exerted by the gloves. We need to understand the intent behind the gloves, Dr. Hart explained during our first session. They were designed to infiltrate your mind, to make you an unwitting pawn in Victor Langford's schemes. Breaking free requires not just psychological resilience but confronting the remnants of his influence. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront the source directly. I returned to the place where Langford was last seen, a dilapidated warehouse on the edge of town, long abandoned and shrouded in urban legends. The building stood as a silent witness to Langford's disappearance, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls a testament to its forgotten past. As I entered the warehouse, the air grew thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water from a leaky roof. The dim light from my flashlight cast eerie shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of impending doom. I made my way to the center of the building, the gloves still clinging to my hands, their presence a constant reminder of the battle I was fighting. In the heart of the warehouse, I found an old, rusted chair and a single spotlight overhead, casting a harsh light on the space. It was there, in that desolate place, that I felt the glove's control reach its peak. My movements became sluggish, the invisible force pushing me to act against my will. I struggled to maintain my focus, to assert my own intentions over the glove's manipulations. "Victor Langford," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" A shadowy figure materialized in the center of the spotlight, the ghostly outline of a man with piercing eyes and a sinister smile. It was Langford, his presence as commanding as ever, even in death. "You were always the perfect subject," he sneered, his voice echoing through the empty warehouse. "With these gloves, you could control others just as I did." I felt a surge of anger and determination. "I won't let you control me anymore," I declared, fighting against the glove's influence. Langford's figure laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can break free? These gloves are part of me, a testament to my power. Without me, they are nothing. But together, we can achieve greatness." Summoning every ounce of willpower, I focused on the techniques Dr. Hart had taught me, forcing my mind to reclaim control over my actions. The struggle was intense, a battle of wills that left me drained but resolute. Slowly, I began to overpower the glove's influence, forcing them to release their hold on me. With a final, defiant effort, I tore the gloves from my hands, hurling them into the spotlight. The moment they left my skin, a surge of energy pulsed through the warehouse, the ghostly figure of Langford dissolving into the air with a scream of frustration and rage. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom and relief. Exhausted but triumphant, I collapsed to the floor, the gloves lying lifeless in the spotlight. Detective Harris arrived shortly after, her expression one of awe and concern as she took in the scene. "You did it," she said softly, helping me to my feet. "You broke the curse." Aftermath. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The disturbances ceased, and I felt the weight of the glove's influence lift from my shoulders. Detective Harris kept me updated on the police's renewed investigation into Victor Langford's disappearance, now focusing on the supernatural elements tied to his legacy. Dr. Hart continued to support me, helping me process the trauma of what I had endured and guiding me towards healing. I found solace in the routines of everyday life, grateful for the stability and peace that had been restored. However, the experience left an indelible mark on me. I became more aware of the unseen forces that linger in the shadows, the remnants of lives and legacies that extend beyond the physical realm. The gloves, now evidence in an ongoing case, served as a reminder of the thin line between control and autonomy, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of darkness. Every Christmas since, I remain cautious of the gifts I receive, mindful that not all presents come without a price. The memory of the gloves and the battle I fought to reclaim my life serves as a silent warning to respect the histories embedded within the objects we hold dear. It taught me that sometimes, the past reaches out to shape our present in ways we never imagined, and that confronting the shadows can lead to unexpected strength and understanding. Stay vigilant, Honor the stories behind the gifts you receive. And remember that true power lies in the ability to control your own destiny, no matter the forces that seek to influence it. Story number 7. The Cursed Necklace. It was a chilly December evening when my mother, Helen, decided to visit her old friend, Margaret. We hadn't seen Margaret in years. Time and distance had stretched the ties of our friendship thin. Margaret had always been the spirited one, her laughter filling rooms and her stories captivating everyone around her. So when she showed up unannounced at our doorstep, carrying a beautifully wrapped package, it felt like a piece of our shared past had come rushing back. Margaret greeted us warmly, her eyes twinkling with the same vivacious energy I remembered from our youth. "I couldn't let the holidays pass without reconnecting," she said, handing the package to my mother. "I found this and thought of you." Helen carefully unwrapped the package, revealing an exquisite necklace. The pendant was a delicate silver locket, intricately engraved with floral patterns that shimmered under the kitchen light. It was stunning, a true work of art that seemed to hold a story within its design. "It's beautiful, Margaret," Helen whispered, admiring the craftsmanship. "Thank you so much." I watched as my mother clasped the necklace around her neck, the silver resting gracefully against her skin. There was something almost ethereal about it, as if the locket held more than just sentimental value. Margaret smiled, but there was a shadow in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. As Christmas approached, our home was filled with the usual holiday cheer. Decorations adorned every corner, the scent of pine and cinnamon wafting through the air. But shortly after Helen began wearing the necklace, strange things started happening. It began subtly, minor accidents and odd coincidences that we easily dismissed. A vase knocked over by a gust of wind, a lamp that flickered inexplicably. At first, we laughed them off, attributing them to the hustle and bustle of the season. However, the incidents grew more frequent and unsettling. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, the lights went out, plunging the kitchen into darkness. Moments later, they flickered back on, but the necklace was gone from Helen's neck. Panicked, I searched the house, only to find it lying on the kitchen floor, its silver surface gleaming ominously. When Helen picked it up, her face paled, and she hurried to take it off, wrapping it carefully in a soft cloth. The atmosphere in our home shifted dramatically. The once warm and inviting space now felt heavy with an invisible presence. My younger brother, Jake, started having nightmares, waking up screaming about dark figures lurking in his room. My parents argued more frequently, the stress of the unexplained events straining their relationship. The necklace seemed to be the epicenter of our unraveling peace. Determined to understand what was happening, I began researching the necklace. Late nights spent sifting through old books and scouring the internet yielded little, until I stumbled upon an article in an obscure genealogy journal. It detailed the history of Margaret's family, tracing back several generations. According to the article, Margaret's great-great-grandmother, Eleanor Whittaker, had crafted a similar locket. The piece was believed to carry a family curse, a dark legacy passed down through the generations. Eleanor Whittaker had been a talented artisan, known for her intricate jewelry designs. However, her life was marred by tragedy. Her husband had died under mysterious circumstances, and she was left to care for their children alone. Desperate and grief-stricken, Eleanor had imbued her creations with a piece of her sorrow, unknowingly binding a curse to the items she crafted. The curse was said to bring misfortune and despair to those who possessed the jewelry, a dark reminder of Eleanor's unending grief. Realizing that Margaret's necklace was the same cursed locket, I confronted her. Margaret's facade of warmth cracked, revealing a depth of sorrow and fear that mirrored Eleanor's. "I didn't know," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "I found the locket in an old trunk in my attic. I thought it was just a beautiful piece of jewelry, a family heirloom to cherish. I had no idea about the curse." Desperate to save my family, Margaret and I decided to seek out a way to break the curse. We reached out to local historians and consulted with experts on family curses and dark legacies. One name kept coming up: Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned folklorist who specialized in curses and supernatural phenomena. With Margaret's help, we arranged a meeting. Dr. Hart listened intently as we recounted the history of the necklace and the strange occurrences that had befallen us. She nodded thoughtfully, her fingers steepled in contemplation. Eleanor's curse was born out of profound grief and loss, she explained. To break it, we need to address the source of the curse, Eleanor's unresolved sorrow. We must find a way to help her spirit find peace. Together, we delved deeper into Eleanor's story, piecing together her final days and the events that led to her husband's death. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Eleanor had been consumed by her grief. Unable to let go of the past, her sorrow had become a dark force, binding her spirit to the necklace and inflicting misery on those who wore it. Dr. Hart suggested a ritual to honor Eleanor's memory and help her spirit find closure. We decided to perform it on Christmas Eve, hoping to lift the curse once and for all. The night was cold and quiet, the house eerily still as we prepared for the ritual. Dr. Hart guided us through each step, her voice steady and calming as she recited ancient incantations. We placed the necklace on the mantelpiece, surrounded by candles and symbols of peace. Margaret spoke softly, sharing her own sorrow and the weight of the curse that had haunted her family for generations. As the ritual progressed, the air grew thick with energy, and the shadows in the room seemed to twist and writhe in response. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the house, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. The room was filled with the sound of anguished whispers, echoes of Eleanor's pain and longing. I felt a presence, a sorrowful spirit reaching out, desperate for release. Tears streamed down Margaret's face as she continued the ritual, her voice merging with mine in a harmonious plea for peace. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until finally, a profound silence descended upon us. The oppressive weight lifted, and the house felt lighter, the darkness dissipating as Eleanor's spirit found the closure it so desperately needed. The necklace, once a symbol of our suffering, now lay inert on the mantelpiece. Its curse broken, we felt a sense of relief and peace wash over us. Knowing that the dark legacy had finally been lifted, the strange occurrences ceased, and our home returned to its former warmth and tranquility. In the days that followed, life gradually returned to normal. Jake's nightmares faded, and my parents' relationship began to heal as the tension that had plagued our household dissipated. The necklace remained on the mantelpiece, a beautiful reminder of the journey we had undertaken and the strength we had found in confronting our darkest fears. Margaret moved back to her own home, her eyes reflecting a newfound sense of peace. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. "I never wanted this for you or your family." I nodded, feeling the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. "We're just glad it's over," I replied, my heart full of relief and hope for the future. That Christmas became a turning point for us, a reminder of the importance of facing our fears and addressing the unresolved sorrows that can bind us to darkness. The cursed necklace, once a source of pain and misfortune, now stood as a testament to our resilience and the power of healing. As the years passed, the memory of that harrowing Christmas faded, replaced by the warmth of new traditions and the joy of a family united. But the lessons learned remained etched in our hearts, a silent reminder of the thin line between love and sorrow, and the strength it takes to bridge the gap between the two. Cherish your loved ones, honor the past, and remember that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for peace and redemption.